Okay, so Zok Tahila Gemara. I just want to start presenting today is the 9th day of Tevis, which, according to a lot of Pshitas, it's even brought down in the Slichas that we're going to say tomorrow for Sarah Tevis, is the yahrzeit of Ezra, Hanavi, and Nehemiah. And Ezra was a Kohen. He was, I think, the 32nd generation or 23rd generation, Ben Achaben from Aaron, a Kohen. And he single-handedly brought back the Yidden to Eretz Yisrael, to Yerushalayim, after the Golus of Bavel. And he was the first person, I think, that I'm aware of, that did a mass correction of intermarriage. Nowadays, the way they deal with intermarriage is they try to be Megayer, the other spouse. He actually convinced people to leave their spouses to marry from within the faith. That was one of the things that Ezra did, and he brought back Torah to Klal Yisrael that had been forgotten in an incredible way. So it's his yahrzeit today, and it's also the yahrzeit of I think it was Rabbi Yehuda Nogid, Rabbi Yosy Nogid, in the year 1066 or 1067, and there are those who say that that's one of the reasons for the tiness of Asar B'Tevis. But it is brought down that the 9th of Tevis is also a day of tiness, either because of Ezra and Nehemiah, or maybe because of Yehuda Nogid. It's not clear what date was on. Anyway, moving forward, we were discussing the machloikis between the Tana Abashol and the Tana Kama. The halacha is, if someone eats truma b'shogi, now of course someone who's not qualified to eat truma, a Yisrael, a Zar, who eats truma b'shogi, the Torah says that person must pay keren v'chaimish to the kohen, and we already learned that the keren and the chaimish that he gives, it's not in cash, but he actually gives it in peiros. And we had a machloikis yesterday if he gives keren v'chaimish based on the value of what he ate or based on the volume of what he ate. So if he ate a pound, does he give back a pound? Or if he ate $1 worth of fruit, does he give $1 worth of fruit back? And the nafkamina is if its value went up. If its value went up and it's pound for pound, he's going to have to give back a lot more than he actually ate. Then Abashol and the Tanakama had a machlokes, how much truma must a zar eat to trigger the chiyuvim? So if he ate it b'shogig, how much does he have to eat in order to trigger a chiyuv of keren v'chaimish? And if he ate it b'mezid, how much would he have to eat to trigger the chiyuv of misa b'dei shemayim? So the Tanakama learned that it says ki yoichel, this ki yoichel kodesh, which is a lashon achila. The shear that you must eat of truma is a kazais. It's not based on its value; it's based on its volume. Abashol says it says v'nosan lakoinis hakodesh. You have to give it to the kohen, and an esina is not considered an esina unless it's a shavapruta. So therefore, Abashol learns that in order to be chayiv any of the chayuvim of meila of eating truma, so if you eat the truma, if you're Yisrael, the truma b'shogig, he has to eat a shavapruta worth of truma. We don't care how much it is, if it's a kazayis or not. Tanakama says it's a kazayis, and Abashol says that it is a shavapruta. So the Gemara had a problem. The Gemara brought a brisa that seems to indicate that you need both. You need a shavapruta and it needs to be a kazayis. And that seemed to, this brisa was introduced by Rabbis Talmidim to Rabbah, and they seem to have had a
Oh, Baruch Hashem, I thought it was me. You're on mute. David, you're on mute.
I think that where he gives the shear has terrible Wi-Fi reception.
Oh, it's don't forget we're live. Just reminding you.
Yosy, we can't hear you.
Did not hear me yet?
Now we hear you for the moment.
At what point did I get cut off?
When you said good morning.
No, you got cut off by Rav Papa. But
So Rav Papa wanted to suggest that maybe Abba Shaul meant that you need both. You have to eat a kazayis, and it has to be worth a shava pruta. The Gemara proves from a brisa that that's not the case. The Gemara quotes a brisa that shares the discussion that went on between Abba Shaul and the Tanakama. And the Tanakama said the following in response to Abba Shaul. They said, Amr loy amr shava pruta. We only say that you need a shava pruta, ela le'inyan me'ila b'lvad. Aval truma, but for truma, einay chayiv achi heiboy kazayis. You're not chayiv until there's a kazayis. Well, if Abba Shaul holds you need a kazayis, then he would agree to that. What they should have said was, kivin sheyesh b'kazayis miboylei. What the Tanakama should have told Abba Shaul is that for truma, once there's a kazayis, automatically there'll be a chiyiv, and it's not necessary for it also to be worth the shava pruta. So that from there the Gemara said to Yufta, to Rav Papa, because this proves without a doubt that the shita of Abba Shaul is that you only need to have a shava pruta. Even if it's less than a kazayis, you'll have all the chiyuvim of truma. And that's where we're up to now. The Af Rav Papa Haderbei. Actually, I want to take a moment to go back, because if I'm not mistaken, when we finished off yesterday, we finished off from Umi Ba Abba Shaul Tarti. I don't know if we learned this inside yesterday. So let's learn this inside. Umi Ba Abba Shaul Tarti. Does Abba Shaul require both a shava pruta and a kazayis? But now we learned Abba Shaul Omer es sheyesh bo shava pruta chayiv b'tashlum. If you eat truma and it's a shava pruta, then you're mechuyev to pay. Es she'ein bo shava pruta. If there's not a shava pruta, ein chayiv b'tashlum. You're not chayiv to pay. Amru loy, the Tanakama responded to Abba Shaul, loy amru shava pruta ela le'inyan me'ila b'lvad. The only time the value of a pruta is relevant is when it talks about me'ila. That's having a noah from something of hektish. Aval truma, when we're discussing the halachas of a zar who eats truma, einay chayiv ad sheyeh by kazayis. You will not be chayiv until you ate at least a kazayis, which would indicate that Abba Shaul holds it doesn't have to be a kazayis. But according to our Papa, that according to Abba Shaul, it also has to be a kazayis. It just also needs to be a shava pruta. The Tanakama should have responded differently. What the Tanakama should have responded is that by truma, once there's a kazayis, you don't need any other qualification, and there will already be all the chiyuvim of eating truma of a shaygi. But since the Tanakama did not say that, rather the Tanakama said it indicates clearly that Abba Shaul holds it does not need to be a kazayis. You only look at its value, and it all has to be as a shava pruta. So to Yufta. So this disproves Rav Papa's argument that Abba Shaul holds you need both. And now the Gemara continues. V'af Rav Papa hadebei. Not only are we disagreeing with Rav Papa because of the brisa to say that Abba Shaul means you only need a shava pruta and not a kazayis as well, Rav Papa himself said the same thing. So Rav Papa himself has backed away from his argument that Abba Shaul holds that the truma also has to be a kazayis. And this is a longish brisa where we're proving it from. It says v'chata b'shkaga. V'chata b'shkaga is the pasuk that it says by me'ila. The halacha is if someone is moil b'hektish and he's moil b'hektish b'shogi, he benefits from hektish. The halacha is he has to pay a keren b'chaimish, and he has to bring an asham me'ila. He has to bring a carbon. Well, what if someone purposely had a noah from hektish? Would he need to bring an asham me'ilas? Zok the Gemara, Zok the Brisa, v'chata b'shkaga. Davke if it was b'shogig, prat l'mezid. If someone is moil b'hektish b'mezid, he does not bring an asham me'ilas. Frek the Gemara or frek the Brisa, why would I need a pasuk to teach me that by me'ila I do not bring an asham me'ilas if I was moil b'mezid? I would know it very easily if I'm a kal v'chayim, but I didn't. Umash shar mitzvahs. Just like other mitzvahs, such as the chiyuv of eating dam, where if you ate dam b'shoyig, you bring a chatas, or the chiyuv of eating chaylev, if you eat chaylev b'shoyig, the severity of the Isser. Nevertheless, is amazing. Even though it's such a severe affair that it has a chi of kares, nevertheless, b'mezid does not bring a carbon because it says shag me'ila, which is not nearly as a severe Isser as Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me again?
Yes. We only lost you for around 10 seconds.
I have had very good. I have a funny feeling that could be since the weather is wet, it's impacting the service here.
Are you outdoors?
So we'll try again. No, I'm in the Oicher of the Gura. I'm within
That's
10
what it
feet
looks like.
of the Wi-Fi source. I'm sorry?
I was just kidding with you.
No, I didn't hear what you said. What did where did I cut out?
10 seconds before you came back on, you cut out. Literally 10 seconds.
Okay, so then I was right in here. So the Gemara says, the Brisa says, you need a pasuk to tell you that you don't bring the nasham ilas if it's amazing. Frank the Brisa, why do I need that pasuk? I should know it from a kal v'chomer. Madach the chiyuv of eating chaylev, which is a severe isser. When mazit, it leads to kares. There is no chiyuv to bring a carbon if it was mazit. Mazit, there's no kares from Meila. There's misa b'dei shemayim, but there's no kares. So misa b'dei shemayim is less severe than kares. Eino din shepater amazed. Surely you should not bring a carbon ashama ilash if you were over b'mazed. Zok Gemara, no, I wouldn't know that. The kal v'chomer is not a good kal v'chomer because I'm going to show you an angle where meila is actually more chomer than other chiyuvei chatos. Lo yomamrit b'shar mitzvahs shekein lo chayev b'hen misa. Meila is very, very severe because Meila has Misa b'dei Shemayim, while the other affairs don't have Misa b'dei Shemayim. Tomer b'Meila shechayv b'Misa. So Misa is more severe than the other Isurim because it has Misa b'dei Shemayim and not Kares, which is a faulty argument because we know Kares is more severe than Misa b'dei Shemayim. But at this point, the Baraj seems to flip around and say possibly that Misa b'dei Shemayim is more of a serious einish. So therefore, since Meila is more chamer, I need a pasuk bishgaga to tell you prat lemezid that you do not bring an asham meilais if someone is moil b'mezid. I don't understand this brayso. Haitana meikara alima lekari. In his first presentation of the kal v'chomer, he clearly showed that he holds kares is a more severe einish. Ulubesayif alim is more chamer. We know that kares is more chamer. So this doesn't make any sense. So really, we're back to square one. What is the svara? Where's the angle where meila is more chamer than other isurim? And because of that, we cannot learn from other isurim that mezid doesn't bring a carbon. Where is the angle? Well, Amar lay. So Rabbi Chia bar Avin told Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak, Hachika Amar. This is how you might understand where Meila is more severe than other chiyuvei chatas. Loyim amrit b'shar mitzvahs shekein loichayev ben misa papachas mikazayis. If someone eats chaylev, he will not be chayev kares unless he ate a kazayis. So it's less chomer. You need to eat more of it. There's a minimum share of how much you must eat to violate. So maybe that's why you don't bring a carbon on mezid. Tamer b'meila. Shechayev b'misa pachas mikazayis by meila. What is it talian? It's talian value in Shabbat Pruta. So you could be moil with less than kazayis. So here's an angle where meila is more chamer than the other isurim that you bring a carbon chatas for, because meila is relevant even if it's less than the kazayis. So therefore, it's more chamer. So I might think that you bring an asham meilas even on a mezid. Kamashul on the pasuk. That you only bring an asham me'ilah if you made me'ilah b'shayim. Well, Amarle, and he told him back, Tanuach daitach sheinachtas daiti. Rab Nachman Yitzchak told Rab Chia, oh, Gewaltig, you should have a chavos hadas, you should have a relaxing mind, you should have a peaceful mind. You know why? Because you set me at ease, because you came up with this unbelievable svara, how you found an angle where Me'ilah could be more chamer than other chayuv echatos, and the angle that you found was that it's relevant even less than the chazayis. Well, Amar Lei, and Rab Chia Ba'avin told back to Rab Nachman Yitzchak, my nichusa, you shouldn't really be so happy with this teretz, because it's not a good teretz at all that I offered. The Rab of Rab Sheshes Shadu Barnaga. This great teretz that I thought I had, Rab and Rab Sheshes shot it down. So we're still going to be stuck looking for an angle of how Me'ilah is more chomer than other Yisurim. How did Rab and Rab Sheshes shoot us down? Because Man Shamet Lei, the Omar, Hazed b'Me'ilah b'Misa. Let's think. It's very clear from this brisa that this brisa holds that the chiyuv for being moil b'mezid is misa b'dei shemayim. The brisa practically said it beferish, right? Madich, other yisurim which have a chiyuv chorus don't bring a carbon on mezid. Kol shekain me'ilah, which is only misa b'dei shemayim, would not bring a carbon on a mezid. So you see clearly our brisa that we're trying to explain holds that there's misa b'dei shemayim for the isra me'ilah. Well, the question is, how do you know that? Hazed b'me'ilah b'misa Rebbe. Clearly, our Mishnah, our brisa must be going according to Rebbe, who is the Tana who holds that there's a chiyuv misa b'dei shemayim for me'ilah, and it's Rebbe. The Tanya we learned a machlokes. Hazed b'me'ilah, if you were moil b'mezid, Rebbe oimer b'misa. Rebbe says the oynish is misa b'dei shemayim. The chamam b'asor are merely allowed. My time, Rebbe. Let's try to get an understanding. If Rebbe says that there's so how do you know that there is a chiyuv of misa b'dei shemayim for me'ilah? Omar bavo gomar chet mitruma. He learns it from Tuma. By Tuma it says umesu boy ki chalaluhu. By Tuma it says beferish that there's a chiyuv misa, and it uses the word chet by Tuma, and they use the word chet by me'ilah. So we say whatever halachas apply to Truma, apply to me'ilah. Ma Truma b'misa, just like Truma has an oynish of misa b'dei shemayim. If you azar each Truma b'meisid, af me'ilah b'misa. But the problem is, once we're saying now that the Mikar from Truma, umina, ma Truma b'chazayis, af me'ilah b'chazayis. Once you're saying that you're learning from Truma to Me'ilah, Misa b'dei Shemayim, well, then you also need to learn from Truma to Me'ilah that the minimum shear to violate this Isser is a shear kazayis. Once you hold that the minimum shear to violate Me'ilah is also a shear kazayis, you can no longer say Reb Chia bar Avin's angle of how Me'ilah is more chamer, because Me'ilah you're chayiv even on pachas and kazayis. Because you clearly learned from Truma that Me'ilah also has a minimum shear of a kazayis. That's the Gemara's kasha. So that was the Gemara's kasha on this teretz that Reb Chia bar Avin gave. That's not a good teretz because Me'ilah is.
What are you looking for? What?
Umaskif law Rav Papa, and Rav Papa asked a kasha on this kasha that Reb Chia bar Avin just asked, and he asked as follows: Mimai de Rebbe karabonan svirle. How do you know that Rebbe, just because he holds that there's a isur of misa b'dei shemayim by Me'ilah, that he holds like the rabbanon of the machlekes of Abba Shaul and the rabbanon? The rabbanon learned that by truma gufa it has to be a kazayis. Who said that by truma gufa it has to be a kazayis? Dilma Abba Shaul svirle. Maybe our brisa, who paskins like Rebbe, that there's a chiv misa b'dei shemayim, you learn it from truma. Well, maybe truma also is totally nashava pruta and not on the kazayis. Dilma kabashol svirle domer yesh b'shava pruta ava gavda les b'kazayis. So therefore, maybe even though you learn me'ilah from truma gufa is only a shava pruta and not a kazayis. So then his teretz was beautiful. Me'ilah is more chamer than other isurim because me'ilah is relevant even less than the kazayis. So you see here clearly, Pub is arguing that Abba Shaul holds that it only needs to be a shavar pruta. It does not need to be a kazayis. It does not need to be both. But on Amud Beis, we brought from our Papa, who learns in Abishol, that not only does it need to be a Shavapruta, it also needs to be a Kazayas. Here you see clearly that was not Rav Papa's opinion of Abishol. Rather, Rav Papa's opinion of Abishol was that a Shavapruta alone is enough, even though it's not a Kazayas. So this proves to us without a doubt that Rav Papa was Chayzer, and he learns, according to Abishol, even for Truma, you only have to eat Truma, a Shavapruta, even if it's not a Kazayas, it will still bring upon the Keren B'chayim Shva'ashim if it's Shaygig, and B'mezid it will bring on the Chiyav of Misa B'dei Shemayim. So that finishes the sugya that we were talking about, Truma. We had a whole sugya of Truma. We wanted to know how you pay back. We wanted to know how much you have to eat in order to be chayiv. It was a machlokes, Abishol, and the Rabbanon, and the Tanakama. And we wanted to know when Abishol said Shavapruta, does it mean Shavapruta and a Kazayas or just a Shavapruta? And it's quite clear from our sugya now that Abishol meant it's only a Shavapruta. It doesn't have to be a Kazayas. The Tanakama says it has to be a Kazayas. And the Talmidim of Rav Papa, who brought him a brayso, want you to hold it's only telling the Kazayas no matter how much its value is, which is Tanakama. Then there's the brayso that Rav Papa Talmidim asked him from, which seems to indicate that. And then there's the Shita of Abishol that it only has to be a Shavapruta, it does not have to be a Kazayas. And now we're finished with that sugya. But being that we had this diversion and we got involved now in this brayso that talks about Me'ilah, the Gemara needs a teretz. So we need a teretz of why is it that Me'ilah is more chomer? Why is it that Me'ilah is more chomer than other Isurim? So the last shot we had was the way Rav Papa explained it, that Me'ilah you learn from Truma. Truma, it's told in a Shavapruta. So therefore Me'ilah, you'll have a chiv of a Shavapruta, even if it's less than a Kazayas. So in that way, it's more chomer than other Yisurim, and that's why Me'il needs its own pasuk to say that you don't bring in a Shamilas on the Mezid. But Ma'abrei Ravana wanted to come up with another angle of how Me'ilah is more chomer than other chiyuvei karas. Ma'abrei Ravana Amar Hachi Kamar. Where is Me'ilah more chomer? Loyim Omrat. The Shar mitzvahs. Other mitzvahs don't have this chomer. By other Isurim, if you did the Isur without Kavanah in a she'enim mischaven type of mode, you will not be chayiv. What is an example of that? Hilchos Shabbos. Imagine you're in a field and there's a whole bunch of wheat standing. Some of it is still connected to the ground, and some of it was already cut. It just looks like it's standing. And you wanted to cut down the wheat that was already cut. You just wanted to slice it again. And what happened was you weren't looking when you made your arm movement with the sickle, and by mistake, so you had intended to cut tolush, and you cut mechuber. So that was ein mischaven, because I wanted to cut tolush, and I ended up cutting mechuber. Shapater. The halacha is that you're pater, because it's called ein mischaven. Toimer b'me'ilah. By Me'ilah, let's say there were two piles of wool, and I wanted to cuddle in the wool that was chulin, and by mistake, I cuddled in the wool that was a carbon, that was kochim. There's Me'ilah over there. So even though I didn't intend to do the action that would be an Isur Me'ilah, I'm still going to be subject to all the Isurim and the Chiyuvim of Me'ilah. So you see, Me'ilah in that respect is more chomer than other Isurim, where we say Einim Eschaben is mutter. This is what we mean to say. And Rav Nachman says something very similar, but with a small difference that we'll elaborate on shortly. Other mitzvahs have a kula shekein loy mischayev bahen she'ein misasek ki misasek. A person who was not trying to do the action that he committed would not be chayiv. Unlike someone who was planning to do the action, he would be chayiv. And what is his example? Unlike Rav Nachman, unlike Ravna, who said a moment ago, Rab Nachman B'Yitzchak says it's in the Schaven lahagbi as a tolish, because Rab Nachman B'Yitzchak holds if I was planning to use a sickle to cut tolish and by mistake I cut mechuber, that would be chayiv. That would be chayiv by Shari Surim. But wouldn't be chayiv if I saw tvua, I thought it was tolish, and I wanted to grab it to lift up, and it ended up that it was connected to the ground. And when I lifted up, I tore it out of the ground. So in the schaven lagbi is a tolish, you're potter because not only was I not intending to do the malacha on this item, I wasn't intending to do a malacha at all. I wanted to lift something up, not cut. Unlike in the earlier case where even if I had come on to cut, as long as I had come on to cut tolish, I'll still be potter. I'm not going to be told if you had come on to cut tolish and you cut mechuber, you'll still be chayiv. But if you didn't even have come on to cut tolish, you only had come on to lift up tolish, which is not a malacha at all. It's not even the action that's osher b'malacha, and by mistake you ended up ripping out tolish from the ground, mechuber from the ground. That will be potter. Timer b'meila. What if I was reaching my hand out to get something and I didn't notice that there was some oil in its path? And by mistake, inadvertently, my hand went through some oil and got moisturized. Shamal, you're moil there. So you're totally nisasik. You're totally not involved in moisturizing at all. You're just trying to reach your hand out to grab something that has nothing to do with that oil, and inadvertently your hand got oil. That would be a meila. So you see that meila is more chamer than all other yisurim shabbatayra. So therefore, you might have a havamina that you bring a carbon asham me'ilas even on a mazid. That you only bring in a shama ilas if it's shayt. Okay, that takes us to the end of the Bryce of Mila. So we learned about Truma, and the Truma has a chiyav misa b'deshemayim b'mezid, and b'shoyig, if you eat it, you pay keren b'chayim v'asham. And we learned that how much do you have to eat? The malikas abashol, it has to be a shava pruta, and the chacham holds it has to be a chazayis, and there's a third shita that seems to hold you need both. And we learned how you pay back to the kohen. Do you pay him back with fruit? You pay him back with fruit. You have to pay him back with fruit that's of the same value as the fruit that he ate, or does it have to be the same quantity of the fruit that he ate? That covers all the subjects. And what we learned today is that whatever you have by Truma, you also apply to Me'ilah, because the Makar of Misa B'dei Shemayim by Me'ilah is the Gzer Shava Chet from Truma. And therefore, if whatever you learn by Truma, look up by how much you have to eat, if it's a Shava Pruta or a Kazayas or both, those halachas will apply equally to Me'ilah because of the Gzer Shava. And that's the end of the subject. Now we're going to go back to a blurb that the Gemara mentioned on Lamed Beis Amud Aleph that we never explained the reason for. And Mar said, when do you say that you can have truma of chametz? That's only, you can have truma of chametz on Pesach. That's only b'mafresh truma b'chmitza. You had a big pile of tevel that was not chametz. You were mafresh truma from it, and now you have some wheat kernels that are truma. They became chametz. That's how you would have truma of chametz on Pesach. But aval hifrish chametz truma. But what if you had a big pile of tevel that was all chametz, and you were mafresh from it truma? So you're trying to make truma out of chametz on Pesach. Divra koil aina kedusha. It would not work. It would not become truma. So if you have a pile of tevel that's chametz on Pesach, and you try to separate truma from it, it wouldn't work. It would not become truma. Now, according to the Tanakama, that it's all isur hana, you can't have any hana from it. It's not a good nesina to the kohen. There it's pashut. But we're saying, even according to Yosy Aglili, that you're allowed to have hana from chametz on Pesach, so the kohen would be able to use this chametz truma as fuel. Even so, for truma, it wouldn't work for Afrash's truma. Frank the Gemara, where does the Brisa know this halacha from? Or where does the Gemara know this halacha from? Amar Abnacham by Yitzchak, Amar Kra. It's from a pasuk. It says in the pasuk, Reishus the Gandcha, the Siraishcha, the Yitzarecha, the Reishus Gestancha, Titein Loy. You should give to the Kohen. And Loy means give it to him that he should be able to have the full benefit of it, meaning even eat it as payers, as what's normally done with payers. But Loy Loy, giving it to him only for the purposes of burning it, that's not a proper nesina, and therefore Truma will not be chal. So at first glance, what it means is Truma could never be chal on peiros that will not be able to be eaten. And therefore, if the peiros cannot be eaten, they cannot become Truma. And that's why you cannot make Truma out of chametz on Pesach. Masav Rav Huna b'Rej Rabbi Yeshua. So Rav Huna b'Rej Rabbi Yeshua asked a huge question on that. How could you say that you cannot be mafresh Truma, something that will not be able to be eaten, that will have to be burnt? The Brisa says not like you. It says, Ein tarmin minat tamei l'Torah. If you have a pile of tevel that's tahar, and you have a pile of tevel that's tamei, don't separate truma from the pile of tevel that's tamei to be misakin the pile of tevel that's tahar. Don't do that. The imtaram, but if you did it b'shogig, not knowingly, truma is truma. So you see clearly that truma could be chal on truma that's never going to be able to be eaten. Because if the truma is tamei, it can never be eaten, it must be burned. Yet, you see that the chalois works. If someone uses truma tamei, if someone takes tevel at tamei and he's mafresh truma from it, it will work. So how could you tell me that being mafresh truma from chametz on Pesach does not work? According to you, use your pasuk that tells you that you cannot be mafresh truma. Truma will not be chal if it's only going to be able to be burned. So there's a very big difference. This tevel that was tamei, once upon a time, it was not tamei. So since there was a time where it was not tamei and it had a shasa kosher, that will be a good chalois of truma. But hacha, the case of chametz that we're discussing is not any case of chametz. It's a specific type of chametz where it's loy hoisa loy shasa kosher. Chametz that never had a shasa kosher. How is that possible? So the Gemara could go into achmetz b'mechuber. While the wheat is mechuber, there's no chiyuv to take truma. It doesn't become tevel, right? We learned that it only becomes tevel once you have the gemar malacha. So what happens if it became already chametz b'mechuber? So by the time you cut it down and it became tevel and the chiyuv truma was triggered, it was already chametz. So it never had a shasa kosher. But if you cut it down and it was already tevel and had a chiyuv for trumas, and then it became chametz, hachanami the kacha, are you agreeing to me? Are you saying that truma would work? Omerlei, he answered back. I'm not going to be answered back and said, as a matter of fact, absolutely, it would become truma. B'gzeiras irin piskama uvamamer kedishin she'ilta. This is a pasuk in Daniel where Daniel mentions that this was approved by the Malachim. So Reb Nachman Bar Yitzchak was just using the pasuk as like a metaphor, referring to the pasuk, saying that I asked the Malachim, in other words, I asked the big Talmidei Chachamim, and we asked in the Besmedrash. Everybody paskins this way, that even though it says loy v'loy lo'eroi, if something became chometz after it already had its chiyuv truma, avada, you would be able to make that into truma. V'chein morin b'vei midrasha kavasi. And that's how they paskin. That when tevel becomes chametz, you could be mafresh it as truma. But if it was chametz even before you cut it, before it was tevel, then there's no such a kosher, and therefore, even after you cut it and it's mechuyev in truma, you wouldn't be able to be mafresh chametz on Pesach for truma. So this takes us to a whole interesting question. Because when I buy my matzahs for Pesach and I spend $30 Canadian a pound, I expect to get the best of the best, 100% kosher. And it says on the box that I buy, Shmura Mishas Katsira. They're careful that it shouldn't become chametz from the time that they cut it. Well, I feel ripped off because my Gemara says very specifically that it's possible that it's chametz b'mechuber. So if you only watch it for me, Mishas Katsira, how do I know that this wheat didn't become wet and didn't become chametz before they cut it, and now the $30 a pound that I paid for isn't really 100% reliable? You should need tzira, you should need shmira from the moment it starts to push to the understanding of our Gemaras. So I heard the Pesachim say beautifully. The Pesachim say, when do you say that something could become chametz while it's mechuber after it's fully ripened? But before something is fully ripened, it cannot become chametz. And we cut down our wheat that we use for matzah before they're fully ripened. And this halacha that we cut down our wheat for the matzahs of Pesach before the wheat fully ripened saved hundreds of Yidden from brutal murderers from a terrorist attack in Eretz Yisrael. I'm sure most of you remember the story. Does anybody know the story? How cutting down the wheat before it fully ripens saved hundreds of Yidden from a terrorist attack?
Yeah, because of the tunnels that they dug through the.
That's right. It was several years ago.
Yeah.
There was an attack tunnel built, and it surfaced in a wheat field in Israel, and the wheat was very high. So as the terrorists would come out of the tunnel, they would be indetectable. They would be shrouded by the high wheat grain, the high wheat plants. No one would see them. And what happened is the day they popped up, the whole field was cut down. They were fully exposed and taken out in minutes. And they couldn't figure out, it doesn't make sense. And what happened was very partial, is they assumed that the wheat would remain growing in the field until it's fully ripened. But since they were using this wheat field to make matzahs with, they ended up harvesting the field before it was fully ripened, which was unexpected by the terrorists, and that saved the lives of many Yidden, Baruch Hashem. Zok the Heilige Gemara weiter. Ki also Rav Huna bered Rabbi Yeshua. When Rav Huna bered Rabbi Yeshua came, Amar, he said, I have a different makar. You had the makar of Titan Loi v'Loi La'oroi to teach you that you cannot be mafresh truma that's chametz. I have another makar to teach us this halacha that you cannot be mafresh truma from chametz. Because it says Amar Kra Reishis. The pasuk says Reishis the Gancha. What does Reishis mean? That you are separating the Reishis and the remainder Nikarin li Yisrael. That the remainder of what you're leaving over, the tevel that you're being masakin, that will be right for Yisrael. In other words, you're going to change the status of the tevel from something that was osir to the Yisrael to something that was mutter to the Yisrael. Yotzazu, if I'm being mafresh truma, that's chametz, she'ein shirei nikarin. Let's think about it. Tevel, before we were mafresh truma, it's osir b'achila and mutter b'ana. After you're mafresh to truma, and this tevel becomes chulin, it's on Pesach. It's going to be osir b'achila, and according to Rabbi Yosy Aglili, it's still going to be mutter b'hana. So you haven't accomplished anything. So since you didn't make shirei nikarin, since you didn't create a situation where there's more heter on this tvua than there was before you were mafresh to truma, because of that, if you're mafresh truma of chametz, it's not a good hafrasha. So what you're saying is, we don't care if the truma is chametz or not. That's not relevant. All that's relevant is that the remaining chulin should be kamuter lachila. If that's the case, Rabbi Kiveger, what happens if I had two piles? I had a pile of non-chametz grain, and I had a pile of chametz grain, and they were both tevel. And I took from the chametz grain, and I made that truma to be mesakin the non-chametz grain. So here I have a case where the chametz grain will become truma, and the non-chametz grain will become mutter even be'achila to the Yisrael. So according to this shot of Sheshiyur and Nekarin, it's not about the truma, it's about the chulin. So Oibazah, you are technically able to be mafresh truma that's chametz, as long as what you're being misakin is chulin. Is chulin that's not chametz. So why is it that this is a good explanation as to why the truma can't be chametz? In fact, the truma could be chametz. It's only what you're misakin that cannot be chametz. That's Rabbi Kiveger's kasha. Bomba de kasha, he asks it right over here in Gilyon Hashas. Zok the Heilige Gemara Vater. Yosef Rav Acha bar Rav Avia kamed Rav Chisda. Rav Acha bar Avia was sitting in front of Rav Chisda. Yosef v'Amar mishmeid Rav Yochanan, and he said halacha in the name of Rav Yochanan. And this is what he said: Anovim shenipu. You have grapes that are tummy. Imagine you have grapes that are tummy. How can you get wine that's not tummy out of grapes that are tummy? It's a riddle. It's a mystery. You have grapes that are tummy. How would it be possible to get the wine out of them, and the wine will not be tummy. So Zogt the Gemara. So Reb Acha bar Avi said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Dorchan pachos mikabeya. If you take grapes in batches that are each smaller than the kabeya, and you squeeze the wine out of them, the yenan kosher the nesachim. The wine will be kosher for the mizbeach. How is that? When a grape becomes tamei, it's tumas meichel. Everybody agrees. If there's a machlekes rishonim, if an oichel could become tamei, if it's less than a kabetza. But everybody agrees that an oichel cannot be metama something else if it's less than a kabetza. So if I take grapes that are less than a kabetza, even though they're tamei, if I squeeze them out and the wine comes out, how would the wine become tamei? By touching the grapes. But since the grapes are less than a kabetza, the grapes cannot be metama the wine. Since the grapes are less than a kabetza, the grapes cannot be metama the wine. Now, this poses a problem, because you might ask, why do I need the grapes to be metama the wine? If the wine were in the grapes and the grapes became tamei, so wouldn't you say that the whole grape becomes tamei, including the juice that was inside it? Zog the Gemara, you're right, that's a very good point. Alma Kasavar, you see that Rabbi Yochanan must hold that mashkin mifkid pekidi. The mashkin, we don't consider the mashkin absorbed within the grape and part of the grape itself. Rather, we look at the mashkin like it's separate. It's a separate entity from the grape that it's in. And any fruit that has juice, we look at the juice in it like it's separate from the fruit itself. It's merely contained in a vessel inside the food. So therefore, when the grape became tamei, the wine inside it did not become tamei. The wine inside it will not become tamei until it's released from the grape, and now it has its own standalone shei mashke. And when it's released from the grape, if it's touching the grape, then it will get its tuma from the grape. But that's only if the grape is a shir b'kabetza, when the wine comes into contact with it on the exterior. So Gemara, la'emos kamatami, how will the wine be able to become tamei? L'chisachit lahu, only after you squeeze the wine out of the grape. Well, guess what? L'chisachit lahu, less l'shure. When you're squeezing the grape out, remember the grape is smaller than the kabeya. So therefore, although the grape is tamei, it will not be able to be metama the wine that comes out of it. Frank the Gemara, ihachi kabetza nami. If that's the case, then even if the grape is a kabetza, why did Rabbi Yochanan say that you should squeeze out the grapes, make sure that they're less than a kabetza? Even if it's exactly a kabetza, it also would not be able to be metama the wine that comes out of it. Because when you squeeze it to get wine out, you're automatically making it smaller than the kabetza. Dotnan we learn, Tomei Meis, Shesachat Zeisim Vanovim, Kabetza Mechuvenes. If someone was Tomei Meis and he took Zeisim in his hands, so the moment he touches them, he's making them Tomei, and he squeezed them, but they started off exactly a kabetza, Tahirin, they will be tahar. Why will they be tahar? Because the wine that comes out of them is not coming into contact with something that's tamei that's greater than the kabetza. Because the moment he squeezed it to get the wine out, there's no longer a kabetza there, and therefore the wine stays tahar. So the problem is, over there, we say even if the grape started off at exactly a kabetza, it will not make the mashkin tamei. So why is it that Rabbi Yochanan said you're only allowed to use grapes that are less than a kabetza? Zakti Gemara, Hasam di'evet. The brisa that says Atami meish shesachat b'di'evet. If b'di'evet he squeezed out a grape that was exactly kabetza, it won't be mitam of the mashkin. That's correct. But here you're asking me what to do. You have grapes that are tamei. You want to know what to do with them? We're going to tell you to use a little bit less than the kabetza to stay on the safe side. The reason why we don't tell you to use exactly a kabetza, because if you use a drop more, it's all going to be tamei. So we're telling you to be cautious and use a little bit less than the kibetza, so there's less likely of a chance that you could mix it up and use too much grape, and then it would cause the wine to become tummy. So all of this is based on the fact that the wine inside a grape is not part and parcel of the grape. It's mifked pucket. We just say that it's in a container, and the grape is its container. But it didn't become tummy when the grape became tummy. Amal Reb Chisda. So Reb Chisda told Rab Acher bar Reb Avia, Man tzayisla, who's going to listen to you that you hold that the mashkin inside a fruit is mifked pkidi? Ula Rabbi Yechon Rabbach. And who's going to listen to your Rebbe? It's not true. V'chituma shebehen laheichen hocha. Of course, the wine inside the grape became tamei if the grape was tamei, because he holds mivla boli. He holds that the wine in the grape is part of the grape. So when the grape became tamei, the wine was tamei. So just because you released it from the grape, you expect the tuma to disappear? So from the fact that Reb Chisda attacked Rabbi Yochanan, saying that the wine inside the grape is tamei, alma kasavar mashkin mivla beli. He must hold that the mashkin is absorbed into the peri, it's considered part and parcel of the peri, and therefore v'chiven de it mulei uchla it mulei mashkin. The same way the grape became tamei, all of the mashkin contained within it was also tamei. Amar lei. So Rab Acher bar Avia answered back to Reb Chisda, "Va'at lo tizbara the mashkin mifked pekidi." You don't agree with me that the mashkin is merely contained in the grape? It's not part and parcel of the grape. I'll prove to you that it is not part and parcel. I'll prove to you that it's a separate entity merely contained within the grape. Because Vatnan, we learned the following brisa. Tomei meis, shesachat zeisim, a very familiar Mishnah we learned that a moment ago. Tomei meis, shesachat zeisim vanovim mechuvenes kibetza. If a tomei meis squeezed out zeisim and an oven that were exactly kibetza to hire in their Torah. If you agree with me that the juice inside the grape are not part and parcel of the grape, that's why they're tar, because when the tamei meis touched the grape, although the grape became tamei, the wine inside it did not become tamei, and therefore it'll remain tar, because once you squeeze it, it's less than a kibetza. If you Reb Chisda hold that the wine is part and parcel of the grape, amai tahirin. The moment the tamei meis held onto the grape, even before he squeezed it, everything is tamei already. It must be that I'm right, that it's mashkin mifked pekidi, and that's why the wine is not tamei. Amalei, Reb Chisda said, no, that's not how I learned pshat in the Mishnah of tamei meis sheshachat zeisim v'novim. I'll learn pshat differently. We're talking about grapes that never ever became hukshul kabel tuma. So the grapes themselves didn't become tamei because they never came in contact with a mashkin. La'emes miskashri. When will they become hukshul kabel tuma? When is the first time they come in contact with a liquid? When you squeeze them out and the grape juice comes out of the grape, and now it's a mashka and it touches the grape as it's coming out, it becomes huksher. And at that point, when you touch the grape, you'll be metamid. At that point, when I squeeze it, it's not a shear anymore. So even if you're going to say that the grape itself becomes tamei, but the grape will no longer be able to be metamid the mashkin because the grape is now less than a shear kibetza. And I'll prove it to you that I'm right, Dr. Reb Chisda. If you won't agree with me, Hadatanya, we learned a brisa again on Daf Lamed Beis. And the discussion on Daf Lamed Beis was between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Nechuna ben Akana. And Rabbi Akiva said that Truma, that's Osir Bahanoah, if you have benefit from the Truma, you're not Muchayiv to pay. Because Rabbi Akiva said you pay back the value of the Truma, and the Truma has no value if it's Osir Bahanoah. And Rabbi Nechuna ben Akana said, no, you do have to pay back. And we said that Rabbi Nechuna ben Akana hold that you have to pay back the volume of pairs. So Rabbi Akiva told him that this is similar. The case of Truma that's Osir Bahanoah is similar to the following: Halamaze doima, where there's no value, is Latrumas tusim vanovim, the truma of berries and grapes, shenitma that became tamei, she'ein loiba loy heter achila below heter hasaka. There's no heter achila because it's tamei, and you can't burn it either because the liquid that come out of grapes and berries are not flammable. It's not like oil that you can use. So this is something that you could have a no hana from. Frek the Gemara, frek the Bechista, if you hold that the mashkin is mifkid pocket, ha heter achila nami ispa. You should be able to eat this as well because you can avoid making the juice tamei. The boy darchlu pachas mikabetza, because they can your eitzah that you said that you could squeeze out less than the kabetza, and that would make it that the wine or the juice that came out of the perry won't be tamei. So there says that the anovim that became tamei are useless. They're not without the mashkin becoming tamei. Elamai, it must be that the mashkin inside the grape does become tamei, and you have a right to eat that mivz labala and not mifkid pocket. So oibazoi, what Rabbi Yochanan going to do with this brisa? Why in this brisa do we say that there's no heter achila? You do have a heter achila. You could squeeze it out less than the kabetza. That Rabbi answered, Amar Rabba, Gzeira Dilma Asabahu L'Dei Takala. You're right. If you squeeze less than the kabeya, it won't be mitamed mashkin. But we need to be concerned that a person will squeeze more. And if a person squeezes more, it will become tamei, and therefore we say that you shouldn't squeeze it at all. You shouldn't use it at all. You should destroy it, because if you don't destroy it, we're afraid that it could come to a problem. Zok to Gemara. Omer le Abaye, Micha Shin le Takala. Are we worried that you might eat a tamei by mistake? Well, Tanya, we learned matlikin the pas ubishemen shel truma. So the takala that we're worried about is that kishu darchan shemen yoichel mehen. When you squeeze it, the juice that comes out is not tamei, because you could squeeze it pachas mikabeya. But what if you put a grape into your mouth inadvertently while you're squeezing? The grape did become tamei, and if you eat truma tameya, that's a gabal tegis. So to Gemara, are we ever worried that if you have truma tameya lying around, that you might eat it by mistake? Well, Tanya, we learned madlikin bepas ubishemen shal truma shenitmas. You're allowed to keep truma tameya around to use it to light with, or to burn with, use it as fuel. So why can't I leave these berries around to extract the mashkin from them? Amalei, I'll tell you why. Pas zarek le beina eitzim. Bread, if you keep it around and it's tummy, how do we stop you from eating it? You throw it with the firewood. It's going to get ichi. No one's going to take bread that's mixed with firewood and eat it. So therefore, there won't be a problem of the kala. Shemen shal truma, like we learned also a couple of days ago. Rami lebechlimos. You don't store it in a nice pristine jar. You store it in a smelly keli, which means I will never come to eat it. I'll only use it to burn. Zakta magufa. Matlikin the pas uveshemen shal truma shenitmas. You're allowed to light. You're allowed to use as fuel bread and shemen of truma that was tamei.
One second. Didn't we say yesterday that the grapes give an aroma, and that's why you can't even burn it.
You can't leave them around. You cannot leave them around because you might drink the wine.
Well, you can't burn it, and you can't.
If it's old wine, you could make zila.
No, we're not. Yesterday we were talking about grapes.
Right, but grapes itself is fresh wine. You can't keep that around, because if you keep the grapes lying around, you might eat them.
I thought we said yesterday is because of the aroma.
The Gemara said that the aroma would be something that you could do with the grapes.
And that's why.
Before we're talking about wine, not grapes. He said if you had older wine, since you could make zilaf, you might be able to salvage it. But if you had, you could make zilaf right away. And if you had fresh wine that doesn't have deep enough of an aroma, you'd have to have it age a little bit. And since it has to stay in a barrel in your house for an extended period of time, while it's aging, we're afraid you'll drink from it in that time. So the Gemara asked, why did you put it into a smelly keli, just like you store the oil in a smelly keli? On that, the Gemara said, if you're using the wine for an aroma, you're definitely not going to store it in a smelly keli. you're going to store it in a good keli, and while the wine is sitting there in your barrel in your home aging, you might mistakenly drink from it.
Okay.
So the Gemara, so the Gemara says, "Gufa madlikim bepasav v'shem shel truma shnitmas." Abai Amar v'shmei dechizkiya, v'Rav Amar devei Rabbi Yitzchak bar Marsa. So we have two different parties saying the same thing. Amar Apuna l'shanu ala pas. That we say that you're allowed to keep around for fuel, we only mean bread, because when you throw the bread ben eitzim, it'll become disgusting and you won't need it. Avachiti, but if you have wheat kernels that are tamei, those you should not keep lying around, because those don't get absorbed with echini, and you might use them. Lo, you shouldn't keep them around. Shema yabei b'tain yildei takala, you might end up eating this wheat. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, afilu chiti, even wheat you could keep around. In fact, Gemara, why? Wheat doesn't get absorbed with ichi, and you could wash it off and you could repair it, and you might eat it by mistake. So how could you allow wheat kernels to be around? So Gemara, you're right. Raw wheat kernels you cannot leave around. The only time you could keep them around is if you cook them and soften them into like a porridge, and then you throw them amongst the wood. Then we're not worried you're going to eat it because they become ichi. But hard kernels you're not allowed to save. So too in our case, where we're saying that you're allowed to keep wheat kernels lying around when they're tummy, that's only if they're soft and mushy and they become disgusting when they're thrown amongst the wood, and that's why you're allowed to use them. So just to summarize, what we learned today is we had this halacha, this trick of if you have grapes that are tummy, according to Rabbi Yochanan only, you had a solution of salvaging the liquid that came out of it by squeezing out grapes that are less than the kabeya at a time. So therefore, they will not be able to be matama the wine that comes out of them. The kasha that was asked on them was from tusim. We know that you're not allowed to keep around. There's no value at all to berries or grapes that became tameh. Why can't you squeeze them less than the kabeya? So the Gemara says you can't do that because we're afraid if you leave it lying around to squeeze, while you're squeezing it, you might put a grape into your mouth. But other than that, you have a way, and that's by Tuma. But if you have anything that's tameh, any fruit that's tameh, you can extract the liquid from it without making the liquid tameh, and the liquid will not become tameh being inside the peri as part and parcel of the peri. That was what the Yochanan held. The Pchista said that no. The Pchista said mashka that's inside the peri will automatically become tameh with the peri. And the reason why a tamei mace who squeezed out zaysim in an oven, it's going to be tar, is because it's speaking about grapes in an oven that were not yet hochshel l'kabel tuma. But if they were already hochshel l'kabel tuma and a mace touched those grapes, without a doubt, the grapes become tamei and the juice inside them become tamei as well. Okay, I guess we could stop here.
Shkoyach, perfect timing.